Hi, my name's Steve and welcome to the Seaside Allotment channel, and I'm in the polytunnel today and it's absolutely gorgeous. And this is the January edition of What Am I Sowing and Growing. I'm actually filming it on the 31st of December. So in this video I show you all the little seedlings basically that I've got growing, and I show you all of the plans that I've got for what I'm going to be sowing in January. Now, if you want to see what we're harvesting, all the mature plants rather than the seedlings, then just look at the full video tour of all the allotments and the back garden as well. So, January. Now, I actually followed my own advice and didn't sow anything in December. I think it's pretty much a waste of time. But there are some things that it's worth sowing in January, but only if you've got specific circumstances like I do. So basically, these are the things you need. You need somewhere with lots of light to grow your seedlings, start your seedlings off. Then ideally, you probably, in most cases, you want to move them somewhere cool, because if you start them off indoors in a place that's warm, with winter light levels, they're probably going to get a bit leggy. But if you start them off and just grow them for, get them started in the warm, you still need quite a lot of light just for those first few days when they're coming up, and then move them somewhere cooler. Like, for example, in my case, I've got a mini greenhouse. I'll show you these things later. Then yeah, you can, it's a pretty good environment. You can grow lots of things on. So first thing is you've got to have somewhere warm to germinate. You've got to have somewhere light for the first week or so. And then you've got to have somewhere cool and very light to keep them growing. Then you've got to have somewhere to plant them. So in my case, I've got the big polytunnel that I'm sitting in at the moment. I've got a few spots in the conservatory where I like to have veggies growing, and so that's where, for example, early tomatoes, early cucumbers, things like that are going to go. And I've got some nice deep coal frames, and that's where the early brassicas are going to go. And I've got some little low tunnels that are all full at the moment, but I'll be transitioning those over to veggies for spring by the time the veggies that I'm sowing in January are ready. So that'll be probably March time. So, and the other thing to bear in mind is, in addition to those things that you've got to have in order to be successful sowing in January, there's kind of the why bother element to it, because it's going to be better to grow it sow in February. And mid-February is about the right time to start growing most things. But why? What's the point really of doing it in January? Well, there's two real reasons for me. So the first one is that it's really nice to have some things a little bit earlier, because, for example, we don't have them at all now. So radishes is a great example. Radishes sown now, pretty successful, and you're going to get them a few weeks earlier than if you sowed them in February. So that bird is chirping away. I don't know whether you can hear it. It's really loud. And so what's the second reason? It's put me off now. What's the second reason? So the second reason is kind of continuity of supply. So we really like to have a continuity of kale leaves, for example. We eat kale pretty much every day. Obviously, kale will be going to seed in May time, and so it's great to have new mature kale plants that aren't going to go to seed in May and are going to keep you going through. Well, so actually we've still got some of them in the ground now, so they've gone almost a full 12 months. Now, timing is critical here really, because if you sow them too early, then they will just go to seed in May. But I find that if you sow them in January, so far we've been lucky, and we've managed to, have really healthy plants in May time. Well, ready for harvest in May, just as the kale plants from last year are coming to the end. and then they keep going, all the way through June, July, etc. And then the main crop kale plants kick in, and then we can pull those early ones out and replant with something else. So yeah, continuity of supply, a few treats early in the season, and that's the same with the cucumbers and the tomatoes. I'm only going to sow 2 tomato plants basically, well, sow a few more seeds, but I'll only pot on and grow on 2 tomato plants. One will go in the polytunnel about here, and that'll get wrapped up in a bit of fleece if there's any frosts and things, and the other one's going to go in the conservatory, and I'm basically going to do the same thing with cucumbers. I'm going to do probably one cucumber in the conservatory, and then another cucumber sort of wrapped up here in the polytunnel. And again, most people won't bother with that, but because we're self-sufficient in fruit, in veg, and we want to be as self-sufficient as we can in fruit, that's it's just an extra treat really. I don't, for example, I don't eat any cucumber that I haven't grown. I just don't really like them, and so it's really great for me because we harvested our last cucumber in kind of like December time, probably the beginning of December, end of November, and so it's going to be really nice to get early cucumbers. Tomatoes we make an exception for. We do buy a few tomatoes, but again, it'd be really nice to have our own instead. So that's all the rambling over with. What I'll do now is just show you the places that I talked about where I'm actually going to be planting stuff, and then we'll get on the computer and I'll show you the planting plan for January. And I'll just point out that all the stuff on the computer that you see, all the databases and all of that, it's all available for free for other people to take copies of and play around with to your heart's content. Copies are your own, you can change them and modify them, and everybody does, because everybody's needs are different, but you can get them either empty, so you can just start populating them with your own data, or you can get them with my data and you can kind of look around and browse around all of my stuff, and use it or delete it, whatever you want to do. So let's have a look. So I've got this little low tunnel. At the back of that little low tunnel, in between those spring onions, I'm going to plant little clumps of mange tout peas. Those will grow without any supports. Basically, I'll just lie them on the soil in between the spring onions. So next up's this deep cold frame, and I've got 2 of these really deep. So these are fantastic for starting brassicas in, and you can actually see that I've actually started some there at the back. And then I've got my mini greenhouse, and at the moment quite a lot of it is taken up with these baby sprout plants and lots of cabbages waiting to go out, and loads more successions of cabbages in here, although I did find a slug in here, and as you can see it's been eating one of those, and some more little baby cabbages. But this is kind of where a lot of those lettuces and things like that I'm going to be sowing in January are going to go, and it's got a little cover here so I can double cover it if I need to. I mean, lettuces will survive, but they like it a bit more if they're not getting too many frosts. So that's where I'm going to be doing the planting. So what I'll do now quickly is I'll just show you all the little seedlings that I've got in the ground, and then we'll get home and I'll show you what's going on the computer. I've got this really nice bed of Novara lettuce, which is one of my favourites for spring, and as I say, these are all little seedlings that are just overwintering. We won't be harvesting these until sort of February time, but they should really come into their own in March. I've got this little bed of winter density, and I don't like winter density actually in winter, but again I really like them in March and April time. Provide some lovely crunchy leaves for the salad mixes by then. We've got these spring onions and overwintering main crop onions, and hopefully these will be ready in May. They'll probably be quite small by then, but that's the time we really need them, because that's the time our storage onions we tend to be running out of them. And another bed of beetroot, which I'm hoping will be ready sometime in April. Pretty nice at the moment. And as I mentioned earlier, stacks of carrots at various different stages, because we've only got a few containers and a couple of beds of carrots, mature ones, so we're kind of relying on these being ready for harvest in about April time. And then this is our main winter crop of lettuce and spinach. Okay, so I'm back home now, and I thought I'd just show you my favourite place for sowing seeds, which is where these books are, on this shelf in the conservatory. It gets loads of sun, it's nice and warm, it's out the way, cats don't sleep on the veggies, and then of course I've got my windowsills here and lots of other various windowsills and things, but that's where I kind of grow on my seedlings. I generally use a cooler windowsill just for doing the initial germination, because a lot of things, they don't need any heat. In fact, some things prefer it a little bit cool. So definitely when you're sowing things like spring onions, they don't need any heat. The only things really that need any propagator heat are the tomatoes and the cucumbers in this month's video. So let's get on the computer. Okay, so we're on the computer now, and I thought I'd give you a quick update on my databases. Now, these databases are the version that I'm currently working on. I've not made these public at the moment, but this is just a quick look. So first thing is, I track all my varieties. This is just a view of the varieties that we're growing in 2020. And I really like this view, and I gradually sort of add more and more information to it as I learn about the varieties, as to what the optimum times to sow them and all of that sort of thing are. But yeah, it's just a really lovely way to kind of visualize all the things that are going on and everything that we're growing. So a new thing that I've added now is I'm actually doing bed planning. So now I've named all my beds, and I know what I'm growing in what bed roughly at what time of year. Now, I do also emphasize that nothing goes to plan in gardening, so you know, be prepared to change these plans, but it is kind of useful, and because I'm making a lot of changes this year to the way that I garden, it's quite nice to have this. And the view I'm currently looking at is what I'll be harvesting in May, and I've particularly found this useful. I've got a month by month view of what I will actually have ready for harvest, and this is really great for, you know, browsing through this and making sure that I've got a really nice wide variety of things. I haven't got too much of one thing, too little of another thing, and I really like this. And so yeah, this is a big upgrade for me to keep track of this, and it'll help me no end with managing my successions. And then what I do is I just take everything that I need to, so what I've also got in here is the sowing date I need in order to be able to harvest in that particular month, and that effectively automatically builds my sowing log. But right now I just cut and paste the what I need to sow in January, say, from this bed plan into the sowing log. And I do that because I'm always going to be sowing a little bit more and a few extra things, because, as I said, things don't go to plan, and it's nice to have things in reserve in case things don't work. And so the plan is never quite the same as the sowing log. So that's the reason that I've left these uncoupled at the moment. So this is the sowing log for January. We're going to look at that in a minute. And then the other thing I found really, really nice is to track my first harvest dates. And so this is, I'm referring to this all of the time to see what I sowed and when I took my first harvest, because second harvests are kind of generally easy because they're in the prime season for growing, but first harvests are often experiments. And so it's really nice to see how all my experiments worked out and what actual harvest dates I got. And for example, you'll see that I talk a lot in a minute about sprouts that I sow really early in the season in order to have them, the leaves, because we love sprout leaves, in early May. And you can see that I got my first harvest of sprout leaves on the 2nd of May, which is just perfect. That's just as the kale is waning. Same with carrots. I got my first harvest of carrots on April the 29th, and again that's just when our stored carrots are finishing. So yeah, and I'm also obviously trying to push the boundaries on this because I'll soon be adding another date on here, which is the 2020 date, so I'll be able to track the difference between first harvest dates in 2019 and first harvest dates in 2020 and gradually build up a really good understanding. Now the next thing I'm doing is adding a database for my seed packets. I'm forever losing track of what seed packets I've got. I'm either running out or I buy too many. I forget the ones that I've got. So I'm just going to keep a log of these. This will link to the varieties database. So this is the one we just looked at here. So I'll know for this variety how many seed packets I've got, and I'll number on my seed packets so they're really easy to find. And from now on, I'm just going to keep seed packets in numerical order, and they're automatically given a number, and so it makes it really easy to find the seed packets that I need because I can never find them. So many seed packets, and yeah. And also it tells me roughly when I think that packet's going to expire. I don't strictly use the expiry date on the packet because loads of seeds like brassicas work long after the expiry date, but also when I need to buy them again. And so that's going to be really useful for me. I have added sort of notes and lessons learned. So I've got all my things that I learn over the year, and I'll link those to the varieties. So that I can easily see, when I'm planting Musselburgh, what notes have I got associated with Musselburgh leeks, for example. And then I've got my old Sowing Log there, renamed for 2019, and obviously I'll keep all previous years of those as I go. So that's pretty much it. They're the updates coming soon. Not enough rainy days for me to get around to doing it, but obviously I don't charge for this, so I can't guarantee any service, but I will try and get it out sometime in January, this update. Then let's have a look at the Sowing Log. So this is the whole purpose of this video. It took a long time to get here. What am I sowing and why in January of 2020? So the first thing is I'm putting a new big bed in the back garden, and that's primarily going to be for salads in July, but I want to find something to use it for earlier in the season. So one of the things I'm going to try is some lamb's lettuce. See how it goes. I like lamb's lettuce. I've got lots that I've overwintered, but I've never tried it in the spring, so I thought, yeah, let's give it a go. Next thing is I'm going to sow some aquadulce broad beans, and the reason I'm sowing those is just to fill in a few gaps where we've had them not germinating. We normally sow them in the ground, but I'll sow some here. They'll be ready to go in the ground in February, late January, and yeah, they'll just fill in some gaps. Then Oregon sugar pod. It's a bit early for these, I think, but I sow them, I showed it in the video, I think, in my little hoop tunnel. I let them grow on in there with the hoop tunnel on for a month or so, and then when the hoop tunnel comes off, beginning of April probably, because it's got onions in, so onions will be quite happy by then, then I'll build a little structure and I'll just tie up the beans, which will be quite long by then, probably like 12 to 18 inches long. I'll just tie them up to that structure and let them romp away. Did that last year at the back of a coal frame, worked really nicely. Definitely think that's the best way to do early peas. Next one are carrots. quite a lot of carrots, but I'm going to start these in the conservatory, which is where I'm sitting now. They'll germinate within 7 to 10 days, and then pretty much as soon as they germinate, I just pop them in the polytunnel. So I'm only using the heat of the conservatory just for those initial 10 days while they germinate. They want really as much light then as you can give them. You can give them more light in the polytunnel. Next up are radishes. Radishes do surprisingly well this early in the season. In fact, I don't even grow radishes in the summer. I really like them. Sort of, well, you actually won't get them until early spring. I think my first harvest date for radishes, let's have a look. Go back a bit. 21st of March and 11th of March. So that's quite nice to know. So yeah, germinate them inside in modules, 3 seeds to a module. Don't bother with any more than 3 seeds to a module though, because they are growing early in the season where there's not that much light, so you don't want to give them too much competition, but 3 seeds to a module seems to work okay. And they need to go somewhere under cover, so they need to go in a polytunnel or a coal frame or a low tunnel. Don't bother with them outside. So that's radishes. We grow lots of spring onions. We won't grow any leeks yet. Far too risky. Leeks are most likely to just run to seed. And you know, you can grow them later on in the season and they're just fine, so wait for those. Spring onions though, they do really well. I'll probably use Stir On and White Lisbon, a mix of those two. Yeah, I'll get those started. Need lots of trays of spring onions because we get through a lot, and just fantastic in spring, so we'll get those planted, and they actually will go outside probably by the time they're planted, because again it'll be sort of March time probably by the time they're big enough. And what next? Oh, I will just sow a few cabbages. We've got loads of cabbages, but it's always nice if you get a couple of little gaps, stick a couple of cabbages in, so it's nice to have a few. It's not going to be a big part of what we grow, because by spring we're starting to switch over to our various kales, and let's come on to those. So we like, in sort of spring and summer, these are the 3 we like. We like the Nero Black Magic, or it's a Carvelo Nero, but the actual variety name is Black Magic. It's really nice. It grows really well early in the season. It needs to go though in a coal frame or a low tunnel. It's not worth putting in a polytunnel. But yeah, one of those. And then of course you take the tops off again, probably about April, end of April, and then you've got really nice plants, really strong by then. Dazzling blue, we really love that. That's a kind of cabbagey cross between a cabbage and a kale. Really, really nice. Again, that does really well. And we'll just put some curly kale in, like a winter boar or something like that. But the real highlight for me, and I keep on going on about it because it's so great, are sprout leaves. We actually love sprout leaves, and we put little clumps of 3 sprouts. We plant them together. I don't know what it is about the clumps, but it seems to just trigger a lot of leaf growth. And the leaves, and it's so much more prolific than cabbage, but it's a fantastic alternative to cabbage in lots of different recipes. We really like it steamed, of course, but there's such tender, lovely leaves early on in the season, and so we'll grow those clumps. They'll probably be about ready the beginning of May, and then we'll end of April, probably maybe the beginning of May, and then we'll take those plants out about sometime in July, because that's when we take the covers off the main crop sprouts, and we won't be sowing those until March. but of course then they take over and we start pulling the leaves off the main crop sprouts. Now sprout leaves also, as I understand it, are one of the healthiest of all the brassica greens. So if you like sprouts or sprout tops, grow them for the leaves. Fantastic. Next up, Charlotte potatoes. Now there's lots of, Charlottes are a second early, but we grow them as a first early in the polytunnel. They just seem to like the cool weather better than anything else that we've tried. And we've never lost anything to a frost, although we do fleece them in the polytunnel if there's going to be a hard frost. We will do probably 3 containers, something like that, every 2 weeks, which is enough for us for new potatoes, but also just because we don't want to clutter the polytunnel up too much with just loads and loads of potatoes. What we do, we have all of ours are chitting now, so we saved potatoes from last year. They're chitting at the moment on the windowsill, and we will be planting them middle of January. I don't think there's a huge benefit in planting them any earlier than that. They're not going to grow very much faster. They're just going to take up space that you could be using for something else that's better suited to this season. But it does mean that we get a lovely first harvest. Let's have a quick look. First harvest of Charlotte's, 11th of April. So really, really lovely and definitely worth having. Now, we plant those in containers, and I think really you've got to have them somewhere warm. So we've got a spare bedroom, we put them on the floor in there. Also put them underneath the desk that I'm sitting at in the conservatory. They're just out of the way, they don't need any looking after. You just water them before you put them in and just leave them until they break the surface. And as soon as they break the surface, bung them down to the into the polytunnel or a greenhouse or something like that, put a bit of fleece on overnight and start another batch. So then there's my earliest lettuces. Now we really like lettuce. Debbie and I eat a lettuce salad every day, very popular with the rest of the family as well. These are my favourite for early season: Navara, Cantarix and Tessie. We might bung a few Grenoble Red in as well, but we've got lots of Grenoble Red in the ground, but I might put a few in. Now, so the January 15th sown ones, just have a quick look at the first harvest dates. My cat's going bonkers outside, so I hope that's not annoying you too much. April 21st, so that's when I took my first harvest. Now, the way that we do these is we put them outside under fleece, and we'll probably do that sometime in March, middle of March probably, and they do pretty well under fleece. They don't mind a bit of frost, but they like it in that environment. And of course by then that's when some of our overwintered stuff is starting to come to an end, and so we start transitioning to these. And it's an experiment for us to do this in the back garden, where the light levels are slightly lower than they are on the allotment, but hopefully by middle of March light levels should be fine, so should do well. Then there's a couple of experiments. First one is cucumbers. I don't like shot put cucumbers. These are the ones I like, these little small ones. We will go some big sort of supermarket like ones later on in the season, but for now we're starting off with Ladiva, and I've never sown them so early, but because I've got warm space in the conservatory, I'm going to put them on my conservatory shelf, let the plants hang down out of the pot. We did that for our late cucumbers and it worked really nicely, so hopefully we're going to have some lovely early cucumbers. That'll be a real treat for me. I will put some in the conservatory as well, and I'll wrap them up in fleece on cold nights, so hopefully they'll go okay. And then I'm going to do only one type of tomato. Tried all sorts last year, nothing really worked apart from Ildi. and I really like it. And you only really need a small number of plants, because just look at the size of those trusses, absolutely fantastic. And these plants just romped away in the cold. So I'm going to do one in the conservatory, cordon type tomatoes they are. I haven't got that much space in the conservatory, so one plant is enough, but there's so many fruits in a single truss. You don't really need more than a couple of plants, especially so early in the season, because we're going to be sowing our main crop tomatoes much later than this. Absolutely no point starting tomatoes unless you've got somewhere heated for them to grow on. And then end of the month, 28th, another batch of shallots, and also going to bung some field beans. That's in that long bed that I was talking about that I'm putting into the back garden. Don't need it until June, so I'm going to bung some field beans in there, because the field beans are really nice in smoothie mixes, and our field beans on the allotment will have gone by then, because we cut them down in the end of March, so that we can plant the brassicas and the squashes, the brassicas, and we do that basically sometime in April normally. So yeah, it's nice to have a few field beans still kicking around, so we're going to try them out on that long bed. So that, I think, is it for January. And I just obviously seeds are pretty much free, but beyond this list, I'm not sure there's much that I would recommend you grow. There's all sorts of things that conceivably you could get to germinate, but in many cases you're much better just overwintering things. So for example, if you're talking about, say, Calabrese, sow them in October, and then you'll have lovely, stocky, healthy little plants ready to plant early. If you're going to do Romanesco cauliflowers, do the same. If you're going to do cauliflowers, do the same. Overwinter them. If you've got a greenhouse, cold greenhouse, you don't need any heat. I think that's a much better approach than trying to get them growing at this time of year when light levels are so low, although it's a beautiful sunny day today. But yeah, and lettuces, again, just as much better to get them sown and planted in a cold frame or something like that in September, October time, and yeah, then you can enjoy them very early next year. Sow them a bit earlier and you can enjoy them all the way through winter. So with that, I think I will finish up. So if you're sowing and growing anything over winter in January that I'm not doing, that you think is a great veggie to sow, I'd love to hear about it, and I'll see you soon.